Hello and welcome to this episode of the AI Show. Happy Monday. Hello, friends. I'm excited to be here. I am excited for today's show. By the way, we've got a lot of stuff. Monday, where we treat it like Friday on the AI Show. Where's everybody coming to us from? Let me know. Put it in the chat. I'm excited that you're here. We have a good show lined up for you today on AI, ML, and ML Ops with a bunch of amazing guests that are fantastic people. And obviously your questions, your comments are most appreciated and welcome. So again, welcome to the AI Show. Let's talk about what we're doing today. I got my Wacom tablet going on up in here. So I thought I would show it to you. And also tell us where you're coming from. You might not know this, but there's about a 30-second delay from when I talk to when you hear it. So I always ask questions, and then it feels like I'm not answering them, but I will. Today, we are, number one, doing scaling your AI ML practice with MLOps. And this is the key thing, the shining. And you know what? It was such a nice long topic that we made it into a three-parter for everyone. The first part is going to be with Abe, part one. Part numero uno, part one. Setu, who is not here because he's in Singapore. Part number two. And then finally, last but not least, Scott with a part three. At Microsoft, we have reached peak Scotthood. We have about a 50 million Scots here. In fact, as soon as I get to my 10-year tenure at Microsoft, I am required legally to change my name to Scott. All right, where's everybody coming to us from? India, welcome, a friend. Excited that you're here. Parimal Deshpande. Hopefully I said that right. India is a lovely place. I haven't gone anywhere since the panna cotta of yesteryear, so apologies. From Greece, Ioana Gianni, welcome, my friend. I am so excited that you are here. I would love to go to Greece. It's like one of those places that, like, there's a movie in the United States called Grease, all about Greece, I think. Sunny ? Downtown Seattle. Jay McCormick. I only use like one knob on this. It's a vocal processor, if you're wondering. Zoom V3 vocal processor. That's what it is. Pretty excited that everyone's here. And by the way, the most important part of all of this is obvi your questions. And so make sure you get those queued up if you can, so we get them answered, because we're talking all about MLOps today, and hopefully that would be helpful to you. And as you know, all of the stuff that we do is recorded for all of posterity, but also the pre-cut videos that are more tailored and what's the word I'm looking for? Not tailored, but precise are available on Microsoft Learn, their video platform. And I think the other thing, I forgot to mention, the other thing is we are also on Spotify now, which is amazing. But the other thing I wanted to talk, I keep forgetting, is let me go to github.com. I'm looking at stuff here. GitHub.com, and we want community. Here we go. So I have a screen. I'm looking at a screen right now. You're probably wondering, well, what is he doing? No, that's just not it. This is not it. I'm trying to find the GitHub. Let's look for it. GitHub community. GitHub community. Here we go. GitHub community. On the GitHub community page, we have under discussions, we have a machine learning and ML ops sitch that everyone should go to and ask questions. Oh, look at that question in here. I'm currently using embeddings in my project, but I'm not getting the desired results. As if fine-tuning the embeddings might be a solution. What is the concept of fine-tuning embeddings? Oh, that's a good question. 4 hours ago. Adhikari Deepak. 4 days ago, and then 4 hours ago. Yeah, I need to answer this question. So there's one. No. Then we go to machine learning and ML ops. There's a ton of questions here. This is cool. Go here and ask your questions, answer questions. That's what this community is all about. So please go there. All right. Without further ado, I think Abe is here. So let me see if I can't get Abe going. You ready, Abe? Thumbs up. Boom.
Hey everyone.
Abe, dude, we don't hang out enough. What's going on, bro? Is it something I said?
No, Seth. It's just I'm a busy guy now. So much has happened in ML.
Dude, you sound like a robot. What's going on with your audio?
What's going on? Let me fix this.
It's cool though. It's cool. It's like you sound like this. It's like the AI is overtaking you to the point that you sound like a robot. All right, let's hear what you got now. He's looking very pensive. Can you hear me, buddy? Oh, maybe he froze. And oh, there you go. Oh.
Better?
Yes, better. No, what's cool is like you froze with like like you were like concentrating, but it looked like disapproval. And I was like, oh no, Abe, no, dude, I was just kidding. I was. If you don't know, a couple of shows ago.
Yeah, I don't know. Sometimes I just turn to a robot on this.
It's true. Well, I mean, that's kind of cool. It's like you got that sitch going on. All right, so let's play this. We did a 3-parter, and you talked about principles. Are you willing to stick around and answer some questions?
For sure, I'm here.
All righty, let's play it. Here we go. Part 1 of scaling your MLOps practices. Here we go. You're not going to want to miss this episode of the AI Show, where we talk all about scaling your AI ML practices with ML Ops and Azure Machine Learning. This is a 3-parter, part 1 of 3. Make sure you tune in. Hello and welcome to this episode of the AI Show. We're talking all about scaling your AI ML practices with ML Ops and Azure Machine Learning. This is part 1 of 3, and I've got my good friend Abe with me. How you doing, my friend?
I'm doing well. How about you?
Fantastic. It's been a while. We talked about ML Ops before. I'd love to get the down low on ML Ops again, but AI is changing a lot, right?
It sure is. There's a lot new stuff happening. I'm super excited, and as you can see, there's a lot of breaking news in the past. I guess we're recorded in May now, so a lot has happened. So as you can see, Microsoft has been super busy in 2023. Things along, partnering with OpenAI, Copilot for almost everything. So you're seeing a Copilot for Office, GitHub, VS Code, Bing, Edge. I could keep naming SharePoint, OneDrive. The list can go on. So you're probably thinking to yourself, all right, how is Microsoft releasing all these AI models?
Yeah, because I've done machine learning stuff, and it's actually quite hard. So how does this kind of innovation? How do you keep pace with this kind of thing, and how do you do it yourself if you want to do it?
Yeah, the big part of doing this at scale is it's always thinking about how can I adapt this to some sort of MLOps or some sort of pipeline to quickly release these models to production. And that's what, at Azure Machine Learning, we partner with a lot of teams internally to help them with MLOps. And you're probably asking, what is MLOps? If you haven't heard of MLOps already, um, I'm going to tell you.
Yeah.
So basically, what MLOps is how do we get these ML models to production? So as you saw, all these OpenAI models, how did Microsoft get them to production so quick? So MLOps has three main pillars. So it's the people, it's the process, and it's the platform. And it's like, how do you bring together all three of these major pillars to make sure things are automated? Your software infuses ML and delivers, continuous values to your customer in a quick time, right? So in the people, process, and platform aspect of things, Azure ML does help with the platform. Setu and Scott will talk about processes we've talked about, we're coming up with the MLOps Accelerator, but also getting the people enthusiastic about MLOps is a big thing. And what are the key benefits of MLOps here? Like the real key benefits of MLOps is if you have these three things working together, you're going to increase automation, collaboration, and reproducibility, which would then equal faster things going to production and in a secure manner that's super auditable. So that's kind of like the big thing about what MLOps is. If you haven't watched the video we recorded last year, we go into more into detail about this. So I'll recommend you check this out.
Yeah. So, a question I have before we get to the next stuff is I have found this a lot because I talk to a lot of people about machine learning. I have found that there is no amount of platform or tool that will cover up bad process or people not buying in to the
Yes.
process. Is this your experience as well?
That is definitely the experience. It's like, any software. It's like if you're like everybody use Git and you have somebody on your team using like OneDrive or Dropbox to put their
Mhm.
code, it's
Oops.
really not going to work. Yeah, exactly. So, when Git first started, everyone needed to buy into Git. How do I do Git push, Git commit? And now the tools and platform are a lot better. So people have better processes, people are educated. So I would assume, or like most companies are doing the same thing. They're
Mhm.
upskilling people at MLOps on like how do I use these tools to get stuff to production faster. So you're right, the people is super important. People need to know what they're doing, how they're doing it, just like they had to do for Git, PRs, GitHub, and things along those lines to collaborate quickly.
The other question I have is machine learning, because I come from the DevOps world. I've done DevOps stuff before, but machine learning is by nature just different. Would you say the process is different from DevOps to MLOps? And if so, what does that difference look like?
Yeah, the process is slightly different. And, luckily, like we've thought through this over the past year to really make sure we can conceptualize it. So we've talked to a bunch of customers over the past year to really talk through what this life cycle looks like, right? What is the difference between machine learning and the DevOps world? So as you can see on the screen, what we've come up with is, three big pillars and a surrounding managing loop. So as you can see, like over the past year or 2 years at Azure Machine Learning, we've talked to many customers and validated these hypotheses. And what we see for enterprise machine learning life cycles, it's usually starting from prototyping, then I go to training, and then I go to operationalization. So basically what that means is, most data scientists, when they're working with stuff, this is why it's a little bit different than normal DevOps, is they basically work in your dev branch. They prototype, they work on notebooks, they work on the hypotheses. Then you can't just like release things to prod. You have to then train that model somehow. So, there's the loop in the middle. Like, how do you train that model? How do you scale up? How do you compare experiments, pick the right model? And when you've picked the right model, how do you then prepare that model, put in the right container, maybe start operationalize that model, deploy it to prod, and when that thing is deployed to prod, how do you then monitor things, promote things from the dev stage into prod when it's going to deployment. So, when you think about things that way, that's how we kind of look at, the real ML lifecycle. It's not just a linear process. It's more of
Right.
cycles that can go back and forth, and then it's always surrounded by some sort of managing loop because nobody wants their data leaked. Everybody wants, everything to be in your company or in your enterprise and just safe and secure.
Yeah, and as I'm looking at this, this is actually really, really cool because up here, the process is different. When you
Yeah.
start building a machine learning model, you really are doing experimentation. But then when you
Yes.
move into the training phase where you want this thing to be repeatable, your data size increases, the amount of people that you're working with also increases.
Yeah.
And finally, the other thing, I'm glad you brought this slide. It's one of my favorites. I use it for some other things. But when the difference between machine learning software and other software is if you get the thing to work in regular software, it just works.
Yes.
But machine learning models could stop working over
Yeah.
time too, and that's
Yeah.
what this
Yeah.
makes the weirdness even more weird.
Exactly. And you can see the loop backs in the top and bottom. It's like you might have the greatest model to start with. We need to monitor that model and see how you can retrain that model. So, at the bottom you can see there's a retrain. And if things go really bad, you got to start the project all over again and start this whole loop. So you're completely right. It's not like a static thing. Data changes, the AI, the model gets smarter, it learns more things. There can be skews in the data, skews in the model. So definitely that's something you got to take into account, and that's why these cycles are all cyclical.
Well, Abe, this has been an amazing process that you've been talking to us about. But one thing I would like to ask you is maybe you can give us a preview for part two because we've talked a lot about a lot of concepts here.
Yeah,
But I
yeah,
feel
yeah.
like how can people, if they're getting started, want to do something like this?
Yeah, so just a little sneak peek of what's coming up next is, I don't like to talk too much about all the process. I want people to start doing. So,
Mhm.
next we're gonna talk to some folks in our team that I work with a bunch. They work with a bunch of customers how to scale up their ML practices, and they're gonna talk through, what is the right process, what is the right architecture, what they've heard from customers, like maybe a little bit of an accelerator on how you can get started yourself. So I don't want to give away too much, but I'm gonna let you stay tuned and listen to what they have to say.
Awesome. And just a reminder, if people want to learn more about this, where can they go?
If you want to learn more about it, like lucky for you, we just released a new MLOps module on the Microsoft Learning website. So if you head over to Microsoft Learning website, the link should be on the screen.
You
You should
got
be
it.
able to start upskilling yourself on MLOps, how to use this for your enterprise or your maybe even your own small project.
Awesome. Well, thanks for being with us today, Abe.
Sweet. Thank you so much, Seth.
Awesome, friends. You've
This
been
was
learning
awesome.
all about how to scale your AI ML practices with MLOps and Azure Machine Learning, part one of three. Thank you so much for watching, and hopefully, we'll see you next time. Take care. You're not going to want. Oops, I pushed the button too soon. All righty, Abe, that was awesome. By the way, for those who don't know, when we were talking, one of us lost sound completely, and then we had to fix stuff. Hopefully, nobody noticed. Did you notice, Abe?
I didn't even notice. It was like some magic sleight of
Mm.
hand.
I did it. So here's a question from our esteemed LinkedIn user. Um, it's not a question; it's more of a statement. I wanted to get your reaction. I even include how do I run ML training to ML ops. Sometimes it doesn't have to be a at all times. Sometimes training a very large ML model is also an operations problem. Your thoughts on that?
Uh, yeah, that kind of makes a lot of sense to me. I think, MLOps encompasses that as well. Like training set of MLOps. As we showed, like the middle loop was all about training. So when this person talks about, the training them part of the whole operation, you're correct. That we do have a whole we started with like an inner loop, so prototyping and then straight to deployment. But we added
That's
that
right.
middle loop because of this, because we realized people do need that training. They really do need to understand how do I train this model, a bigger model with more data on maybe a compute cluster or container or some sort of Kubernetes infrastructure. So that's why we kind of have that middle loop as well, so people can talk through those problems and talk through exactly, hey, these are some operation things we need to fix. So we kind of walk customers through those three loops. So that's why we have that middle loop, just for exactly what you stated.
Yeah, and I love the loop stuff. I should have had a picture of it, but you can rewind this if you're watching it in the future. But the loops thing is great because I remember when we were first taught software development, it was like, you got all you got to do is you got to gather your requirements. And once your requirements are all gathered, you're done with that step. And it's not really that way with software. We should not expect it to be the same way with machine learning, right?
Yeah, exactly. And people can see right now, like machine learning is moving really quickly. Like what you thought was state of the art 2 months ago might not be state of the art 2 months
Last
from now.
week.
So yeah, exactly.
Oh, so it's really cool
So
stuff. All right. So
yeah,
I think let's play the second one, because I think there's some questions about like, hey, how can we get started? Here's a question
yeah,
from Parimal.
yeah.
Can you tell me how to get started? And I think Setu is going to give us a little bit of the details on that. Should we turn to him?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. All right, here we go. Part 2 of this great starting your MLOps journey. Here's Setu. Let's start that right now. You're not going to want to miss this episode of the AI Show, where we talk all about scaling your AI ML practice with ML Ops and Azure Machine Learning. Part 2 of 3 with my good friend Setu. Make sure you tune in. Hello and welcome to this episode of the AI Show, where we're talking all about scaling your AI ML practices with ML Ops and Azure Machine Learning. Part 2 of 3. Setu, this isn't the first time you've been on the show. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi. So I'm coming back almost after a year, after spending the last year improving and implementing the MLOps Accelerator with a lot of our customers. So happy to be here.
Fantastic. So Abe did mention a little bit about the Accelerator. I was wondering, is this the same Accelerator that we talked about last time?
Yes, I would say yes, it's the same accelerator, but it's very different from what we had presented last year. We had just one example, and now it's populated with a lot of examples based on the feedback that we have gotten from the customers and what we have done. In fact, I have a whole value proposition slide to talk about it.
Oh, before we get to that, because I have it up ready. So Abe talked about the notion of people, process, and platform. Where does this all fit in?
So our MLOps Accelerator covers all of these aspects. For people, depending on which persona is working on the accelerator itself, I would have support for infrastructure projects or a MLOps engineer projects or a data science project. Depending on the personas, we can help them scale up as well. From a process perspective, we have standardized a lot of these things. So whether it's your single project or whether you have 50 projects, this project can adapt, or this accelerator can adapt to that. And from an practices perspective, because you're standardizing all of these things, this helps you with your overall governance part of it. So it addresses your processes as well.
So let's get into some of the value propositions, because that sounds cool. I love how you framed it. I thought we'd talk a little bit about some of the value props. You gave me a slide. Tell us what we're looking at here.
So we talked about speed, simplicity, standardization, in the previous or the work that we did last year as well. The items in blue is where I wanted to focus on, right? And a lot of these things get lost because, MLOps is so complicated and there is a lot of things that we want to do. So the first thing that, I just mentioned about scale, right? Whether it's your single project or whether you have 50 projects, you can scale this MLOps repository to support all of those things, which means that your processes, be it a single project, be it a computer vision project or a tabular project, this accelerator can adapt to all, right? And the way we do this is extensive use of templates. And these templates are not only from infrastructure perspective, but how you reuse the Azure Machine Learning CLI or SDK to build it in. And that's where we take great pride in doing that. And we have done this at a small scale with a couple of customers to large scale customers where they had multiple projects that they wanted to work on. And based on that, we now have support for Terraform, Bicep as a way to set up infrastructures. And from MLOps, we support Python, PyTorch for tabular. We can do CV, we can do NLP, and any combination of whether you want to do it via Python SDK, whether you want to do it with CLI, V1, V2, we support it all. So it's, in that sense, a pretty complete repository for us to get started with.
And that's really cool because, I mean, if you're spending a lot of time just trying to get started on a complex machine learning project, it feels like time wasted. it's awesome to be able to just have patterns to create things and then scale them if you need more.
Right, that's right. And the other feedback that we had gotten was people struggle in, oh, tell me what MLOps is. How do I get started? So not only we do regular trainings internally, we have done this trainings externally as well. And we have, in the MLOps link, Accelerator GitHub page, you will also find training workshops where you can run this for your own organizations. You can run this for figuring out how to set this up. And we have been working around this for quite a bit, and it has tuned in. So again, if there is any feedback, any support, open an issue, and we'll certainly take a look at it.
I mean, this is fantastic. Are customers benefiting from this right now? Can you give us some examples, maybe, without obviously divulging things that we shouldn't?
Sure. No, actually, we have a perfect case study that the customer was very happy about.
Oh, cool.
It's there on our customer webpage. It's a small organization. It's called Segis. They focus on agriculture. Again, a very important part of the domain. Doesn't matter which part of the world you come from. And they were happy that they used to take about a few months to get any project up and running together with their MLOps piece. And now they mentioned to us, it's like they get it done within days, right? And the amount of savings, and over 90% savings in operating cost and maintenance cost because of these accelerators. So we are seeing real monetary benefit that are coming out of it. And that's a small scale customer where they had a few data scientists working on it. We have another customer, Marks and Spencer's, for those in the UK who would know about it. Fairly large customer. They were probably among our first ones to try it out, and they have multiples of projects working through this accelerator. So again, a small customer to a large customer, our accelerator supports it all.
That's awesome. And I brought up the page because I was like, I'm super curious. So I went to go look. And so I love these project goals that you have right here. Can you talk about them just a little bit, like the goals of this for people that maybe want to know why you're doing this?
Yeah, sure. So a lot of times what happens is when you want to get things up and running, right, there are challenges with infrastructures. Oh, what all do you want to set up? How do you want to set it up? When you have these projects, machine learning projects done, right, depending on whether I'm doing it or Scott will be doing it, their approaches will be different. And Seth, you probably know, right, what you do in Tabular doesn't really scale for CV or doesn't really.
No, it's not even the same universe. Yeah.
So in a lot of these things, right, when you want to kind of determine these patterns, it's very, very hard to do it. And that's where the simplicity and the modularity comes into play. So what we have done is we have templatized the steps. So based on what you want to do, you pick the steps that you are interested in, and I give the data scientist a box to play in. So he has to define this pipeline YAML file, and as long as he does everything in the pipeline YAML file, he's all good, right? Everything of infrastructure, setting up computes, deploying this as an endpoint, be it a batch endpoint or an online endpoint, all of that gets taken care of by the steps that you want to put in place.
I love it. Simplicity, modularity. I mean, it sounds awesome. I feel like I want to see it in action, but that's not you. That's the next part. Can you give us a preview of what Scott may talk about?
So Scott is really going to show you what our accelerator is about, and he's going to do a demo on how to get it up and running and show you an example of working through that. And on the repository, we have a lot of examples. We have demos, we have videos, we have tutorials. So feel free to take a look at that as well.
Awesome. Well, I can't wait. I want to put up the link again one more time for the MLOps Solution Accelerator. Thank you so much for spending some time with us, my friend.
Thanks, Seth.
Awesome. We've been learning all about how to scale your AI/ML practice with MLOps and Azure Machine Learning. Part 2 of 3. Make sure you stay tuned for part 3, where we see a solution accelerator in action. Thank you so much for watching, and hopefully we'll see you next time. Take care. All right, here we are. Part 2, but now we have Scott with us too. How you doing, Scott?
Hi, Seth. Doing great.
Fantastic. Maybe is everyone's internet okay? Because I'm seeing some fuzziness, but maybe it's just me.
Mine
Is it just? Do I look fuzzy to you all, Abe, Scott?
No,
Oh, you look good.
Are you just saying that because you're on my show, Abe?
Hey.
This was cool. Here's some questions. And this is a really good question about templates. How preferable is it to use Azure Databricks compared to accelerators of Databricks itself? Databricks is a different animal, I think, than Azure ML. Would you say so?
Yes, it is. That said, we have had a lot of requests for Databricks support in the Accelerator that we'll see a demo of, and Spark support is expected very soon.
Ooh, how wonderful. Now, go ahead, Scott. Sorry.
Generally targeting a sort of hybrid scenario where Databricks is your training platform and Azure ML is the deployment platform.
Does Databricks, I don't know much about Azure Databricks. Does Azure Databricks have like a deployment story?
Honestly, that's not my particular area of expertise either. But historically, that hybrid approach has been what's been used by our Databricks customers since the deployment options on Azure ML are very strong.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I always say that Azure Databricks is awesome when you're trying to collate data and do machine learning for analysis. But at the edge of notebooks, Python notebooks, there comes a hard edge when you're trying to do machine learning, but for software, not machine learning for analysis, which is a different beast. Because machine learning for analysis, the output is always like a report, a chart, which is super important. But if you're trying to do machine learning for software, Azure Machine Learning is awesome for that too. Would that be an accurate statement? What do you think?
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, especially with if you look at like our Azure ML, there's a lot of cool CLI components to make it easy for you to string things along. And I think Scott in the next part might talk through that as well.
Oh, that was awesome. Yes, in fact, Scott's gonna be doing a little bit of a demo. Here's an answer from our esteemed LinkedIn user. Yes, Seth, they have single endpoint and serverless model endpoint and Databricks workspaces. That's cool. Like I said, Azure Databricks is awesome. Azure Machine Learning is more of like you're building machine learning for software kind of situation, and it's great. Like whatever makes your machine learning process work, I think is awesome. I'm partial to Azure Machine Learning though because that's where I work. All right, no, and Abe, you teed up the next part really well, so let me get that going here. In this one, Scott, do you want to give us a tiny preview of what we might be looking at?
Yeah, so Setu talked about what the goals of the accelerator were, the modularity and the flexibility, and so I want to show what we actually built and where we're hoping to go with it.
I love it. Let's go to that right now. You're not going to want to miss this episode of the AI Show. We're going to talk all about scaling your AI ML practices with ML Ops and Azure Machine Learning. Part 3, the practical bits with my friend Scott. Make sure you tune in. Hello and welcome to this episode of the AI Show. We're talking all about scaling your AI ML practices with ML Ops and Azure Machine Learning. This is part 3 where we get into some actual code. Is that right, Scott?
That's right.
Fantastic. Well, why don't you tell us who you are and what you do before we get started?
I am Scott Donohoo. I'm a cloud solution architect in our AI specialized CSA group at Microsoft and part of the team that has built this solution accelerator over the past year and a half.
That is amazing. Look, for people don't know, I work in the product group, and people like Scott do the actual work to make these products work for customers, which is amazing. I know it's a little inside baseball, but I just want you to know how awesome these folks are. So we talked in part 1 to Abe about some general MLOps principle. In part 2, we talked to Setu about the accelerator. I was hoping maybe we could dive in and see how we could take these accelerators and put them into practice. Can we do that?
You bet.
Fantastic. So just a review from the past 2 things that we talked about. Can you give us a little review?
Sure. In part 1, Abe talked about the overall MLOps story and what we're doing here at Microsoft. In part 2, Setu talked about the MLOps solution accelerator, how much success we've had with it with our customers, where we're trying to go with it. And so now for part 3, I want to give a little bit of a look at what that accelerator looks like and how it works for you.
All right, let's dive in. Let me share your screen.
Great. Okay, so what we're looking here at here is the homepage repo for the Azure MLOps v2 Solution Accelerator. This is open source and public, so anyone can use it. And what it attempts to do is to create a project factory so that you can easily bootstrap new ML projects with end-to-end pipelines and data flows already built for you so that you can quickly get started. Once the accelerator can be used either with Azure DevOps or in GitHub for source code management, pipeline management, and workflows. So what I'm going to show here is an example that I've built using this accelerator that is in Azure DevOps. So once this solution accelerator is set up in your project and your organization in Azure DevOps, you'll have available to you a pipeline called Initialize Project. And when I run this pipeline manually, I can select all the characteristics of the project that I want to build. So I want to give a new project name, or the project name I'm going to pull all these MLOps templates from, a new project name for my repository, my ML project itself, the set of templates to use, and I can specify some other characteristics of my project. For instance, ML project type of classical, so typical ML workflow with tabular data, computer vision workflow, and natural language processing. As well, I can select the interface to Azure Machine Learning that I prefer to use. So the AzureML CLI v2, Python SDKs v1 and v2, and our responsible AI CLI as well.
I mean, this is really cool. So if I'm understanding this right, you clone the repo,
Mm-hmm.
and then you get you could do it in GitHub Actions. You decided to do Azure DevOps, which is awesome in either case. But there's going to be some pipelines that you run that's going to set everything up according to the principles that were described in the previous videos.
That's right.
Okay, and so what you're putting in here is just the custom names of the things you want to do, up to and including the project type. Is that correct?
That's right. And based on the project type, you will get a different set of template pipelines and sample data provided in your project to work with, so that you can
Oh
get an
my goodness.
understanding of what those flows look like.
Yeah, that's really cool. That one of the biggest challenges that I found when I'm explaining this stuff or using this stuff is people are like, I just want to get my hands into the pot and start mixing things around. But you've basically brought all the ingredients for an entire meal in this case.
Trying to and working, improving that meal as we go.
I love it. All right, keep showing us.
So the next, or the last parameter of creating your project is you can select the preferred infrastructure provider, either Bicep or Terraform. And I'll get into some of the aspects of how these are divided up in the project. So once I've selected all this, I would click Run to execute this pipeline. And this Azure DevOps pipeline will bootstrap my actual ML project. When that is complete, I'll wind up with something like this. And as might have been mentioned in part 2, we tried to make this accelerator modular and flexible so that it was easy to modify, and also had a separation of concerns for the people that are often involved in MLOps. So we talk about MLOps processes, and people. Well, a lot of those people have different skill sets, different roles: data scientists, data engineers, ML engineers, and IT. So the form of the projects that's bootstrapped for you is, we've got sample data, in this case for a taxi regression example.
Mm-hmm.
The data scientist would be concerned with the code that is under the data science directory. So we've got the source code for preparing data, training a model, evaluating the model, and registering it in Azure Machine Learning, as well as defining the environment that we need for all of those phases of our pipeline. Infrastructure defines, either in Bicep or Terraform, the complete Azure ML environment that we want to be able to deploy, and the pipeline, in this case an Azure DevOps pipeline, for deploying it. So your IT group may be more concerned with what's in this directory here. And then under MLOps, we have both the DevOps pipelines for CI/CD, so deploying the model training pipeline into Azure ML, and optionally deploying either an online managed endpoint in Azure ML or a batch managed endpoint in Azure ML. These are pipelines that are run from Azure DevOps, and what they deploy into Azure ML are the actual Azure ML pipelines. So we've got a training pipeline that registers data, runs on compute, and registers the model. And then we've got a deployment pipeline for both cases of either batch or online.
I mean, it really is the soup to nuts kind of experience with everything in there, and it's really cool that it has the data, the pipelines, both for running it outside of Azure Machine Learning and for running the machine learning pipelines, which are different things. What does this look like? Is there like how do you run this to get actual artifacts produced?
Right. So the next step after having bootstrapped this project repository in Azure DevOps would be to configure the environment I actually want to deploy for Azure Machine Learning. And to do that, I would edit this file here, infra prod, and I can specify some of the characteristics of the environment that I want. I give it a namespace, a postfix. This could be a number or a string, the Azure ML region I want to deploy to, and what I want to use to represent where this particular environment fits in my overall MLOps practice. So I can deploy this 3 times from different branches of this repo to create a prod environment, a dev environment, a test or staging environment, and so forth. I can also ask it to configure, to pre-create a compute cluster for me so that I can just go straight into running a training pipeline. So once I've done this, then I would first deploy the infrastructure pipeline. And when that pipeline is run, it's deploying an Azure ML workspace for me, along with all of the other assets that I need to run my Azure ML pipelines. And so when this pipeline is complete, I will have my Azure ML pipeline, and I'm ready to run training and run deployment.
That's cool. As part of the infrastructure pipeline, is it just creating the workspace or is it doing more than that?
Deploying the Azure ML workspace, the deployment just creates the workspace.
Right.
And
Okay.
it could be enhanced to add other assets that might be associated with the particular project in mind.
I see. Okay, cool.
So now that I have my Azure ML workspace deployed, I would run my model training pipeline. Now the model training pipeline does quite a bit. It creates the compute cluster. It trains the model, tests the model against some test data, and registers the model in Azure ML, as well as registering the data set that we're operating on. So if we go into the workspace, after that pipeline has been run, I can see that I've got my taxi data is registered as a data asset. The pipeline has been registered and published. I've got an environment that contains all of the Python packages and the base image that I need to do the training for my particular model.
I see.
And when that training is complete, it will register the model as an MLflow model. So at this point, we're done. And we can get to this point in about a half hour or 45 minutes.
That's cool. And so the first pipeline sets up the workspace. The second pipeline sets up all of the attendant assets that you would need to run this job, up to and including running a machine learning job and creating the model in a Azure machine learning pipeline.
That's correct.
Okay, cool. This is cool.
And then lastly, we have optionally, we can choose to deploy that MLflow registered model as an online managed endpoint or a batch endpoint in Azure ML. In this case, I've done both. So I can look at the endpoints that I have available to me, and I've got some sample data in the repo. So if I put some sample data in here, we have a live endpoint with that model deployed, and we can put in data and get back results.
That's cool. And you so this is a look, we're all amongst friends here. You said you could do this all in like under an hour?
I would say under an hour. So the nuts and bolts parts of it are just setting up the credentials necessary to generate the project and to deploy the Azure ML assets. So some service principles, basically.
Well, I mean, this is impressive. Is there anything else to show us, or where can people go and get this stuff?
The place to go is to start at Azure MLOps v2.
Mm-hmm.
We have a deployment guide for what I just showed right here that will help you get started.
So this link that I put up, this link that you gave me is this solution accelerator that has all of this goodness that you just showed. Is that right?
That's correct.
That is amazing. Well, my friend, thank you so much for this. Are people using this? Are you getting some traction?
They are, and it's increasing. Yeah, from part two, I think Setu had some good examples in customer use cases.
I know, but you it's like these are your babies, and you got to be proud of them too. So thank you so much thank you so much for being with us, my friend.
Thanks, Seth.
Awesome. We've been learning all about scaling your AI ML presence with MLOps and Azure Machine Learning Part 3. This was with Scott, where he showed us how it actually works. Thank you so much for watching, and hopefully we'll see you next time. Take care. How about them apples? Was that cool? Good job, Scott. That was delightful.
Thanks.
For the people that don't know, and I'm gonna tell you, because Setu he's in Singapore, right, Scott? Is that right?
Yes.
Because he's in Singapore, we had to record these out of order. So I vaguely remembered that you, Scott, were like, well, didn't Setu mention them? And I was like, yes.
I had to put him on the hook and make some assumptions about what he was going to talk about.
So in the second one, I was like, oh, I got to make sure to ask about the companies, and he did. So if you're watching this, it probably looked like hopefully it looked like we did an order, but twas out of order. Abe, what'd you think?
I think that looked super great, and I even want to try the accelerator again because Scott made it look so easy.
Yeah, and Scott, just a couple of questions. Is this accelerator available on GitHub? I think you said yes, right? It's yes. A GitHub Actions kind of thing too?
Yes. GitHub Actions follows generally the same pattern. It's got some upcoming work to be integrated to make it as straightforward as the DevOps version, but the functionality is equivalent, yes.
Okay, so I was let's just do this, because I mean we got a couple of minutes here. Let me share my screen here. Doop. There's the screen. Let me go to the solution accelerator here. And by the way, I was telling everyone, Scott, did you know that there's a new GitHub machine learning and ML ops community section on GitHub? Look at this goodness. Look at that. And so if you have questions about the accelerator, would this be a good place to ask them too?
This would be wonderful.
Oh, there you go. So make sure you ask them there. So here's the deets. And one of the things that I wanted to look at was this .github thing. I see.
So you won't find the actual deployment templates here.
Okay, where do you find those?
Go to MLOps-templates.
MLOps dash.
It's a different repo. Right now,
Oh.
the Accelerator is split into 3 different repos to separate the various types of templates. We are looking at some simplification efforts coming up to merge all of these.
But this is cool too, because I mean, I don't know. It feels like sometimes you just got to separate the things. But here you go. These are the actual endpoint. These are the actual. Sorry. These are the actual. Here, let me Control Plus here. So this is huge, like ridiculous huge. So this is what, for example, will create your compute environment, like you were showing.
That's right.
And you can put. This is so cool. You can put everything into it, and it just does it.
That's the idea.
Oh my goodness.
Make this as simple to deploy as possible.
And I'm looking at this, and it looks like you've used the CLI a lot. Have you found people like the CLI versus the SDK for AzureML?
I find that data scientists prefer the SDK. ML engineers and DevOps, excuse me, on the DevOps side, would tend to migrate toward the CLI.
And this is so interesting. Now, and again, during the video, you saw me like pay homage to people like Scott that actually work with customers. We work with customers too, me and Abe, because we're in the product team, but we work in a different way. You're actually on the ground, and so that's why when I'm asking all these questions, I'm like, this is seriously interesting. Like an ML engineer and DevOps person prefers the CLI, but the data scientist prefers the SDK. Do you have any intuition as to why that might be the case?
I do not actually. It's a curious question for me. I come from an R background, and for AzureML, the CLI is the way to go. So,
is that because it works with the R stuff is better with the CLI than the SDK?
Because there is no SDK for R. It's otherwise all Python. So
there's a way to use reticulate. Does that work for R people though? I've always wondered.
It works very well.
Okay.
I did work a lot with like the notebooks in AzureML. Like I helped kind of drive that product. So the reason why we found a lot of data scientists gravitate towards the SDK was because you can use the SDK in a notebook. So that's kind of like what happens a bunch, because a lot of people experiment in notebooks. So it's easier to use an SDK in a notebook versus a CLI.
Yeah, but that's true. I guess that makes sense. If I guess it's because of where you're camping out. If you're a data scientist, you're usually camping out in a notebook versus an MLOps person. It's like, hey, I want to run this thing, and I don't want to, I don't want to have its own, like, because notebooks are like a special like wonderland for us, and there's no wonderland in MLOps. It's like run the thing and make sure it runs every time the same way. Where notebooks, it's not like that. This is cool. Okay, let me go back. So you said there was 3 repos. There's the MLOps v2 repo. There's the templates. What's the other one?
There's MLOps project template. And that's a little bit more interesting one, because that has the templates for the various scenarios, the actual data science scenarios, classical, CV, and NLP, as well as the infrastructure templates.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so let's go to the classical one, because this is the one that's interesting. And you have versions for all of the. Okay, here we go. Okay. Let me go into the let me go into the CLI version, because that's the one that interests me. Oddly enough, maybe that says something about me, friends. All right, so it would be under the data science part is where you do the actual machine learning.
Correct.
Okay. So this is just a scikit-learn thing. And what was the problem that we were solving again?
This is a pretty typical data science example using a New York City taxi fare data set. So to predict taxi fares.
You told me that. I remember now. By the way, when we record these things, it's not like we're recording them like 8 years ago. It was literally last Thursday, was it? Or Wednesday? Right. It feels like forever ago, but still. Okay, so this is just a standard scikit-learn. And obviously, when in doubt, start with the decision trees or logistic regression, right? Always. If those don't work, then it's time to put it into like an automated machine learning thing. It'll figure it out for you. This is cool. And then when you save the model, you're relying on ML Flow to do all of the logging.
That's correct. All of the experiment tracking and logging and saving of artifacts is done through ML Flow.
So do you have to? Okay, so maybe my ignorance is showing, but when you do that, how do you get these things to save into Azure ML?
Because we can use Azure ML as a backend for ML Flow. So all of these ML Flow commands talk directly to Azure ML.
Oh, and
They
where do you have
log
to set that
Azure
up?
ML. You don't. You
Oh, it just does it?
Yeah, you import this ML Flow and sklearn, and there's integration built into Azure ML.
Well, I have a button for that. Abe, this is true, right? Because I know I kind of know this, but ML Flow, how does it in the back end? Because I've done this before, and all of a sudden magical things start happening in Azure ML. Did we do something to ML Flow to make it so that it logs to our backend when it's running in the context of AML?
Yeah. So I worked a bunch with ML Flow team and know this pretty well. So basically what happens is every Azure machine learning workspace has a backend ML Flow tracking server associated with it. So if you've used ML Flow before, you know, like when you start an experiment, you have to attach it to a tracking server. So if you have like a Azure Machine Learning Studio, whenever you authenticate to that studio, we know what tracking server that studio is connected to. So we automatically just put all the environment variables for you, so you don't have to do anything.
It's like magic. I need to, one sound effect. I need to write this down because this is super important to everything. I do not have like a harp, the harp sound effect. I feel like I could have used the harp sound effect right now because that is magical. I guess I'll use instead the Wilhelm scream for that one, even though it's actually a good thing. Well, my friends, this has been amazing. Thank you for being with us, my friends.
Thank you, Seth.
All right, so we will see you next time. Hopefully, the MLOps v3 Accelerator will be coming out in a year, and we'll talk again, right?
Absolutely.
All right, Abe, and we'll see you soon too, bud.
See it.
Take care. All right, friends. It's that time again. Time for the walk-off music. That was pretty cool. We got a lot of info out in a very short amount of time, I think. We learned all about MLOps, the new way of doing things, which I think is cool. I gotta turn that other sound off. But that was cool. MLOps v3. I know Janiscu number 7's here. Janiscu number 7. He is bringing up the Twitch space where there's usually like one or two people, and so he's all like, "Hello." No, this one. Anybody here? Janiscu number 7 here in the Twitch space. Hello? Anybody? Next time on the AI show, please make sure to tune in. We're going to be again Monday at 8:30, Monday, May 15th. Another look under the hood of Stable Diffusion with Cassie Breviu and myself. We did an episode a couple of weeks ago, months, I don't know, where we had a part 1 looking at Stable Diffusion inside of a C# application using the Onyx runtime. We're going to round it out, I think, with the completion of that particular project, if I'm looking at everything right, if that's what we're doing. It's going to be a delightful experience because Cassie is amazing, and I always learn a ton when she comes on the show, and she sometimes very gracefully, she's the other co-host of the show, sometimes she takes the show when I'm out of town, or she's out of town, or whatever. Well, she doesn't take it when she's out of town. But hopefully you've enjoyed today's show. We're learning all about MLOps. If there's any shows or any things you'd like us to cover, make sure you let us know. You can catch me on Twitter at Seth Juarez, or go to the community machine learning page on GitHub that I mentioned earlier. We'll answer your questions there. In fact, I have a couple questions to answer right now. But for now, thank you so much for watching, and hopefully We'll see you on the next episode of the AI Show Live. This is me signing out. We'll see you next time.